How's everybody doing? Welcome into Tuned Into NoCo. I'm Ashlee Meehleis, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Volunteer Program Manager Susan Schafer. So first off, thank you so much for joining us today. For our listeners who don't know, can you explain what Volunteer Month is all about?
Absolutely. So what we have right now is National Volunteer Week, which was established in 1974 to recognize the efforts of thousands of Americans who volunteer each year to make their communities safer, more sustainable, and more inclusive. Volunteer Week is part of Global Volunteer Month, which was established by the Points of Light Foundation to inspire and activate volunteers to tackle society's greatest challenges. In fact, a 2018 report by UN volunteers stated that globally, the efforts of volunteers equates to 109 million full-time employees. So it's a pretty impressive number when you think about it.
Seriously, wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So why do you think volunteering is so important for our community?
So about 3 in 10 Americans volunteer. And here in Fort Collins, over 38% of our residents volunteer in some capacity. Volunteers bring a richness to everything they do because they truly want to be there. They give from their hearts. In the city, volunteers give of their time, talents, and treasures to make our community programs more affordable and accessible. Our volunteers cover the gamut from victim advocates and mediators to volunteer rangers and youth sports coaches. Next time you see a friendly face on a city facility or out on the trail, thank them because they're likely a volunteer. And volunteering is actually good for your health. There's been a lot of research that shows that volunteering can help your mental health in that it gets you out with other people. It builds community. There's benefits of physical work when you're volunteering, social, emotional benefits of volunteering, and it gives you a sense of purpose. Some research says that volunteering can actually make you live longer because it gives you that sense of purpose, like you have something to get up in the morning to do. So volunteering is good for your community and it's good for you.
I didn't know that. That's really cool. Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what is Fort Collins doing to celebrate or highlight our volunteers this month?
Yeah, good question. Tuesday night is city council, and that's when we accept a proclamation by the mayor making this National Volunteer Week for the city of Fort Collins. Each of all of our departments have really rallied to offer a schedule of special projects, thank you gifts, and tours for volunteers citywide. While each department is celebrating their volunteer corps separately, we also have some citywide events, and we welcome new volunteers to some of these projects. Our Parks Department is engaging volunteers in several projects this week to spruce up facilities for summer fun. The Gardens on Spring Creek is hosting a behind-the-scenes tour exclusively for volunteers. And volunteers have even been invited to see the unveiling of the new electric bus that happens on Friday, which is Earth Day.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
So the pandemic obviously changed a lot.
Yep.
Now, how has this changed the way people volunteer or the number of volunteers?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So pre-pandemic, on average, we had about 10,000 people volunteer their time with the city each year. That high number was mainly due to the one-day projects and the large number of events that we hosted prior to COVID. Since COVID, we couldn't get that many people together in one space, so our numbers definitely went down. But we still averaged over 4,000 volunteers each year, and those numbers come from our ongoing volunteers, the volunteers that give a day a week or a day a month. And those volunteers really are dedicated to their departments and they give a lot of their time. In the last 2 years, despite the pandemic, our volunteers still donated over 137,000 volunteer hours. And that equates to an economic impact of more than $4 million.
Wow. Now, do you see this number increasing?
So yes, we love to have events in this town. And as things open up and we begin to have large events again and large volunteer projects are possible, our numbers definitely go back up. This town hosts a number of big events in the summer, and we rely heavily on our volunteers to make those possible. I always say the city truly runs on the power of volunteers, and there's never a lack of people who want to engage with the city through volunteer service.
That's awesome. And I know you were talking about some events and especially honoring our volunteers this week. Is there anything that our listeners need to know, something they can go to or how to get involved?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's fcgov.com/volunteer. There's always volunteer opportunities posted on that.
Great. Kind of a little bit more about you. How did you get involved in this?
That's a good question. I've been working with volunteers for over 30 years. My background is actually in conservation and education. I have a degree in wildlife biology, but these fields really rely heavily on volunteers. So I was always amazed at the commitment and skill of volunteers. And about 5 years ago, I moved more towards that side of volunteer engagement. So now my position is housed in human resources at the city. In human resources, we see volunteers as a talent pipeline for the city, and it's fun to be a part of growing talent for our organization. I'm also always impressed with the professionalism and collaborative abilities of the staff who engage our volunteers. We have an amazing team of volunteer managers who make these volunteers feel respected and appreciated and makes them want to come back.
Is there any particular volunteer event that has been your favorite that you've really enjoyed?
I think some of my favorite, obviously given my background, are National Trails Day and National Public Lands Day. People who want to get outside and work on trails or help to further our conservation efforts. They're always so excited to be outside and to give back to the environment that we love and to help care for the environment. I really love being a part of that. But what's even more amazing to me is the volunteers that go through dozens of hours of training to be able to give back in a really impactful way. We have so many volunteer naturalists that lead hikes and school field trips and programs for the public. We have skilled volunteers at the Gardens on Spring Creek that help to make it possible to run our the butterfly house and to take kids out on field trips. So to me, it's just so impressive how many skilled volunteers we have that make our programs really fun, engaging, and rich with experience that staff can't always provide.
Absolutely. That's great. And you mentioned the last couple of years, the volunteers provided almost $4.2 million to the community. Mm-hmm. What organizations do you work with to make these programs happen?
So the volunteer programs that I'm talking about are all through the city. So we have 40 different departments in the city, and about 30 of those rely on volunteers to help accomplish their goals and objectives. So specifically, I'm talking about the city as an organization. That doesn't even count the schools, churches, community groups, nonprofits, and other groups that rely on volunteers. And volunteering is often a component in being a part of a group. When you think about the National Honor Society, those students have to provide volunteer service. And so volunteerism is just woven throughout everything that we do in this community.
Well, that's incredible. Definitely keep at it. That's awesome.
Thank you.
For our listeners who'd like to learn more or how to register as a volunteer for Fort Collins, what can they do? Where should they go? I know you mentioned a website.
Yeah, so there's lots of resources. The city itself as an organization, you can go to fcgov.com/volunteer, or we have a volunteer engagement platform that we actually call Engage. And that website is engage.fcgov.com, which can also be found from the other website I mentioned. Another organization you can go to if you're looking for additional volunteer opportunities is United Way of Larimer County. That's sort of the clearinghouse for volunteer opportunities that come from lots of different entities, nonprofits, and other groups. But really, you can Google volunteer in Fort Collins and you can find lots of different ways to volunteer.
All right. Well, Susan, is there anything else you'd like our listeners to know?
Well, I just want to know we see you. We see you as volunteers in schools I know I volunteer in my daughter's school, volunteers in churches, nonprofits, community groups. You really make this community special and make the world go round. So we see you and we thank you. And I hope anyone who volunteers feels special this week. And if you haven't had a chance to see it, President Biden actually had a proclamation posted, a proclamation of National Volunteer Week. And there's a really nice write-up about it. Again, if you Google National Volunteer Week, it'll pop up. But he announced that he put that out on April 15th. So
nice.
Everyone's getting in on it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for speaking with me today. That was
absolutely awesome. I appreciate your time, and I really appreciate just the ability to put a shout out to all of the volunteers that make this city special.
If you would like to learn more about National Volunteer Month or how you can volunteer right here in Fort Collins, visit fc.gov/volunteer.